You may think you're waiting on God. You may believe that heaven is slow to answer, that your prayers are caught in delay, or that your season simply has not come. But the truth is far more exacting and far more uncomfortable. You are not waiting on the law. The law is waiting on your confirmation. The spiritual law that governs all supply does not choose favorites. It doesn't measure effort or morality or need. It responds only to what has been authorized by the inner court of your belief. Not the belief you speak aloud, but the one you repeat inwardly. Not the voice of hope, but the voice of habit. It does not react to your willpower. It records your baseline. And for most, that baseline is lack. Not because they desire it, but because they have normalized it. They have prepared for it, expected it, predicted it, and built their inner infrastructure around it. They may declare abundance with their mouth, but their atmosphere is still wired for interruption, for struggle, for partial blessings that never last. They may write affirmations in the morning, but brace for disappointment by night. And the law confirms that tone. Not the declaration, not the effort, but the energetic ruling issued unconsciously. That is why nothing moves. You cannot contradict your own decree and expect the law to obey the better half. It does not choose between your Sunday voice and your Monday reaction. It simply obeys whichever one is most constant. Whatever you treat as true, familiar, and structurally permanent becomes law. And the law, being exact, enforces it with silence, not opinion. It does not argue with you, it reflects you. Many speak of spiritual growth, of elevation, of trying harder to attract good. But the law is not attracted. It is not seduced. It is not magnetized by intensity. It is activated by alignment. Until you change what you have called normal, you cannot receive what you call miraculous. The miraculous cannot enter a system that has made fear its foundation. It cannot pass through a gate that is locked with hesitation. And it will not override a voice that has already declared itself unworthy to hold more. There are those who say, "I'm doing all I can." But I tell you, if your actions are not rooted in spiritual permission, then they are the performance of disbelief. Motion is not always permission. Many strive, hustle, plead, and press, not because they believe supply is theirs, but because they fear it will not come. And the law registers that fear as instruction. Not a cry for help, but a lawful command to maintain struggle. This is why I say, the law is not moved by effort. It is moved by identity. What you continually return to, speak into, dress for, budget around, apologize over. That is your true decree. It does not matter how eloquently you speak prosperity if your posture remains that of survival. It does not matter how often you affirm divine wealth if your planning is still based on insufficiency. You are not judged by your wish, you are ruled by your word. And the subconscious, being the servant of law, obeys what you say repeatedly, even when you do not hear yourself saying it. So long as you speak from need, from defense, from vigilance, you cannot authorize abundance to enter. You may wish for it, fast for it, tithe toward it, and cry over it. But until you spiritually permit it, it cannot legally remain. That is why money escapes you. That is why success slips past your grasp. Not because you are cursed, but because you have not revoked the inner judgment you pronounced over yourself years ago, that you are not ready, not worthy, not safe with more. That sentence is still active, and no amount of prayer can override an internal verdict that has not been rescinded. The law you see is not judging you, it is confirming you. Every hour, every breath, every phrase you speak in passing, every time you look at the bill before the blessing, at the delay before the decree, at the fear before the promise, you confirm your old alignment, and the law obeys. Without drama, without exception, without delay. You are not being tested, you are being mirrored. The structure of your life is not a reaction to your intentions. It is the exact replication of what you have spiritually permitted. If something keeps returning, it is not to torment you. It is to expose what you have declared legal in your unseen self. Until you change that judgment, nothing can change around you. For the law cannot bring what you contradict. It can only multiply what you sustain. And this is the danger of partial awareness. When a person begins to speak truth, but continues to feel governed by the old voice, the law will not side with the new words. It will obey the deeper root. A man may call forth divine supply with his lips, but if he continues to calculate for shortage, calculate for failure, calculate for just enough, then the law must submit to that configuration. It will not violate the frame you've built, even if that frame is your own prison. You cannot deceive the subconscious. You may fool others with polished affirmations. You may impress a room with declarations of faith. But the subconscious is not interested in what you perform. It is only interested in what you permit. It listens beneath language, it watches tone, it monitors repetition, and it translates all of that into one simple question. What is this soul continually confirming as true? Every person is a speaker of law, whether they know it or not. Every phrase you let slip without examination. It's always like this. Nothing ever lasts. I don't know how to handle more. Good things never stay, is a mini decree. And the law is not ignoring them because they weren't said on purpose. It is enforcing them because they were said with agreement. Repetition is agreement. Tone is agreement. Familiarity is agreement. And spiritual law, being flawless, always enforces agreement. This is why people sabotage breakthroughs right when they arrive. Not because they are cursed, but because, at a deep level, they have not made peace with receiving. They have not accepted expansion as normal. They still see blessing as temporary, provision as a test, and success as something borrowed, not rightfully theirs. So even when it comes, they prepare for its departure. And the law, again, must obey. Your life is not a mystery. It is not a punishment. It is not random. It is the physical extension of the spiritual permissions you have filed internally and left uncorrected. What you have declared possible, you are standing inside. And what you have declared unreachable, no force in heaven or earth will override until you change your decree. There is no judgment in this, only precision. The law is not cruel, it is clean. It mirrors what you spiritually endorse, and it does so perfectly. If you want more, you must permit more. If you want permanence, you must revoke instability as your norm. If you want abundance, you must stop speaking as if it's the exception. Do not ask the law to override you. It will not. Do not ask Spirit to drop blessings into a house that is wired to reject them. It will not. The structure of your language is the structure of your life. The tone you allow is the territory you will occupy. So now I ask again, not what do you wish, not what do you affirm, not what do you cry out for, but what have you certified as real? Until that changes, nothing around you can. The subconscious mind is not emotional. It is not creative. It does not interpret meaning. It does not ask for clarification. It does not negotiate with your intention. It does not ask, did you really mean that? It does not filter what was said from what was felt. It does not wait to see if you've changed your mind tomorrow. It takes your word at face value and moves. And once it moves, it does not pause until your word changes. This is the great misunderstanding of spiritual students. They speak a decree and they believe the work is finished. They recite an affirmation and they expect the law to rearrange the world on their behalf. But the law is not moved by ritual. It is moved by record. And the subconscious is the recording system that governs all outer results. It is not sacred in itself, but it obeys what is sacred. And what you repeat, dwell on, and react from becomes sacred to it. You cannot speak from faith for 3 minutes and from fear for 30 years and expect the faith to win. You cannot treat truth as a moment and error as a lifestyle. Then demand the law honor the better half. The subconscious does not honor moments, it honors systems. It honors whatever has been consistently installed. And for most people, what has been installed is a subtle but permanent atmosphere of lack, of guilt, of never-enoughness cloaked in humility and spiritual striving. This is why I teach, do not speak unless you are ready to be obeyed. Do not declare a thing unless you are prepared to hold it open through repetition. For the subconscious does not weigh your enthusiasm, it tracks your patterns, and it moves only on the foundation you maintain. You may ask, but what about my belief? What about my heart? And I say, belief without consistency is imagination. And the law does not move by imagination. It moves by legality. The subconscious is not your judge, but it is your clerk. It does not argue, but it does document. And everything you say, whether aloud or under your breath, is submitted as lawful evidence. It is used to write the decree you now live inside. You are not living in your desire. You are living in your documentation. You are not moving through spiritual mystery. You are moving through the echo of your own subconscious rulings. Every fear you tolerate becomes policy. Every delay you prepare for becomes precedent. Every phrase you speak without spiritual alignment becomes part of the script the law must now enforce. The subconscious is not cruel, but it is unbending. It follows your word, not your wish. It enforces your atmosphere, not your hope. And this is why the wise are slow to speak, because they know, once spoken, a word goes to work. Many people ask me, why does the same pattern keep returning? And the answer is always the same, because the sentence behind it has not changed. You may have changed your schedule, you may have changed your habits, you may have even changed your affirmations, but the subconscious is still operating on the sentence you issued 10 years ago when you said, "I'm not ready, it's too late, I don't know how, or I've always struggled with this." And unless that sentence is revoked, formally, repeatedly, and lawfully, it remains on file. You are not suffering because you are being punished. You are circling because the file is still active. The law cannot override a subconscious decree that has been allowed to stand. That is not judgment, that is justice. So many pray for breakthroughs while protecting the very belief that blocks them. They ask for more, while rehearsing what they'll do when it doesn't arrive. They give thanks on the surface, but mentally calculate for loss. They write truth in their journals, but edit every plan to include backup routes based on past disappointments. And the subconscious sees this contradiction not as confusion, but as instruction. The subconscious does not know when you are just being realistic. It does not care if your fear is socially acceptable, statistically justified, or trauma-informed. It does not pause to ask whether you've had time to heal. It moves immediately, impersonally, and perfectly, based on whatever is spoken most often, most consistently, and most unconsciously. This is why many lose the very thing they've prayed to receive. Not because they were unworthy, but because, once it arrived, they could not support it with a system of certainty. Their tone betrayed them. Their self-image expelled the blessing. Their atmosphere issued a rejection letter before the provision had time to settle. Understand this. The subconscious is not blocking you. It is protecting the version of reality you have chosen as standard. If that standard includes delay, reduction, sacrifice, or resistance, it will build walls around you, not to punish you, but to keep you safe inside what it has been told is true. It does not act out of cruelty. It acts out of covenant. And the only way to break a covenant is to write a new one. That is why I teach students to revise not their life, but their language. Not their schedule, but their self-definition. You do not need more time, you need a new decree. You do not need more proof, you need a new premise, and you cannot hold both. The old sentence and the new reality cannot share jurisdiction. One must be revoked, one must be replaced, one must be respoken until the subconscious recognizes a shift in sovereignty. This is why I say, speak only what you are willing to multiply. Declare only what you want sealed. Do not speak what you do not want returned. For the subconscious does not ask if you are joking. It does not wait for a disclaimer. It only moves when you move, through word, repetition, and alignment. Your supply does not come from effort. It comes through channels established by permission. And permission is established by pattern. That pattern is being dictated every day by your voice, your expectations, your emotional default, and the atmosphere you build when no one is watching. So the real question is not, what am I asking for? The real question is, what have I installed so thoroughly, the law now assumes it is my command? Until you answer that question honestly, the law cannot answer you differently. And that is why the subconscious must be trained. Not casually, not occasionally, but deliberately. Because once it receives the new decree, it will not hesitate. It will obey, just as it did the old one. The difference now is, you will finally know what you're saying. If you wish to know what you are truly commanding into form, do not examine your affirmations. Examine your normal. Examine the tone you return to when no one is listening. Examine what you prepare for, what you just expect, what you believe is likely to happen, regardless of how hard you try to think otherwise. That is the real command. The law does not obey what excites you, it obeys what you identify with. It does not deliver your ideal, it mirrors your infrastructure. and your infrastructure is built around what you have silently declared as safe, expected, and familiar. In other words, what you've labeled normal. You may think you're calling in wealth, but if you still prepare for instability, then instability is your normal, and wealth will violate your order. You may affirm divine opportunities, but if you only feel safe in delay, then delay is what you have given legal right to occupy your field. You may speak success, but if your nervous system still perceives overflow as a threat, then the law will not force it upon you. It will wait, not because it is reluctant, but because it is obedient. This is what most people misunderstand. They believe manifestation is about attraction. It is not. It is about administration. The universe does not ask what you desire, it checks what you have authorized. It does not move according to fantasy, it moves according to what you have installed as normal. And what is normal to you becomes law to the subconscious. Once installed, it governs every financial pattern, every emotional threshold, every reaction to gain and loss. This is why two people can speak the same affirmation, take the same action, give the same tithe, and yet one prospers while the other plateaus. Because underneath the declaration is a default, and the law will always side with the default. Do not look at what you prayed for. Look at what you made room for. Do not look at what you posted online. Look at what you budgeted for privately. Do not look at what you wrote in your journal. Look at what you plan to recover from. That is the real decree. That is the language your system has chosen to follow. That is the tone your subconscious has agreed to uphold. It is not malice. It is order. The universe is structured for stability, and so long as your inner world has made peace with hardship, hardship is what the system will deliver. Not to harm you, but to protect your chosen structure. That's why new blessings often feel uncomfortable, not because they are wrong, but because they are foreign. Not because you are unprepared, but because you are unfamiliar. And the subconscious associates unfamiliarity with risk. It says, this is not normal, this is not who I am, this is not what I'm used to managing. And unless retrained, it will reject the very thing you've prayed for, because it cannot yet recognize it as legal. What you normalize becomes sacred in the realm of manifestation. You do not receive what you tolerate, you receive what you internalize. And most people have internalized lack, not because they enjoy it, but because it became safer to expect less than to hold space for the unfamiliar weight of more. So the work is not in striving. The work is in rewiring what you've allowed yourself to call just reality. Be careful with that phrase, for whatever you declare as just how things are becomes how things must be by spiritual law. You say, I'm just being realistic, and I say, then your realism is your God. But the law hears it as doctrine. You say, I don't want to get my hopes up. Then hope itself is disallowed from entering. You say, I always lose it eventually. Then longevity is locked out of your field, not by fate, but by agreement. The law listens for certainty, not enthusiasm. So I ask you, what is certain in your world? Not what is celebrated, but what is automatic. Not what you wish for, but what you reflexively assume. That's the root. That's the decree beneath the decree. And until that changes, nothing lasting can emerge. You cannot outspeak your normal. You must rewrite it. You must train your nervous system to recognize abundance as safe, peace as expected, and overflow as ordinary. Not through effort, but through conscious exposure. Through new language, through ruthless correction of every phrase that drags you back to the old floor. This is why I tell students, guard your normal more than your vision. Your vision will only grow to the size of your atmosphere, and your atmosphere is built entirely by tone. Do you notice how quickly you explain away good news? How fast you apologize for having more? How often you sabotage opportunity before it can settle, just so you don't have to face the possibility of being different. That is not humility. That is allegiance to your old normal. And as long as you protect it, the law will too. You must be willing to disappoint your past. You must be willing to offend your old self. You must let the unfamiliar become your companion long enough for it to lose its threat. Otherwise, every new level will feel like an attack, and the subconscious, in defense of the old normal, will shut it down. The law is not against you. It is fiercely loyal to your definitions. It does not reward effort. It rewards consistency. It rewards familiarity. And whatever you declare normal consistently, even unconsciously, will be confirmed without fail. So if you want to know why the money hasn't come, why the contract didn't stay, why the breakthrough felt temporary, it is not because you didn't ask correctly. It is because you did not normalize the receiving. You did not make a home for it. You did not declare it safe, automatic, and God-ordained. Do not try to feel worthy. Declare the new normal. Do not try to attract more. Prepare for it as though it is standard. Do not beg for confirmation. Become it. And when the law recognizes that your tone has shifted from longing to authority, from novelty to familiarity, it will confirm what is now true. And the truth is not what you wish. It is what you've lived with long enough to call it yours. You may not speak lack directly, but you confirm it constantly. It is not always the dramatic declaration, "I'm broke, I'll never make it, nothing ever works." No, that would be too obvious. Most believers do not curse themselves with boldness. They curse themselves with subtlety, with disclaimers, with nervous laughter, with quiet adjustments to their expectations, with hedging, with soft exits, with a tone of habitual compromise that tells the law exactly what to deliver, without ever saying it outright. And the law obeys. You may say, "I believe in divine supply," yet still catch yourself saying, "Let me see if I can afford that." You may declare, "My provision is unlimited," and still whisper to a friend, "I just hope this deal goes through." You may affirm, "Money comes to me easily," but still plan around discounts, delays, and doomsday scenarios. That is how lack is confirmed, not by intention, but by familiarity. The subconscious does not wait for clarity. It does not need dramatic vows. It listens to repetition. And most repetition happens in moments you do not consider sacred. At the dinner table, in passing conversation, at the checkout line, when you sigh over a bill, when you say, "That's just my luck," when you joke, "I knew it was too good to last." When you casually downplay your own abundance to make others feel more comfortable. These are not harmless quirks. They are policy. And the law moves not by sentiment, but by policy. You must understand, every word you speak carries weight in the realm of law. Not moral weight, not emotional weight, legal weight. And in the same way, a government agent cannot ignore a contract simply because it was said in jest. The universe cannot override the command simply because you didn't mean it that deeply. The law does not ask how deeply, it asks how often. So I ask you, how often have you referred to money as tight? How many times have you described your season as dry? How frequently have you said, "I'm just trying to make ends meet, that's not in the budget, we'll see how things play out, I don't want to get too excited yet"? These are not random phrases, they are liturgies of lack. And every time you repeat them, you reinforce an atmosphere where supply must shrink to match your structure. Not because God is small, but because your spiritual jurisdiction has made abundance illegal beyond a certain limit. Many people confuse wisdom with fear. They say, "I'm being careful," when in fact they are reinforcing restriction. They say, "I'm being humble," when they are actually declaring unworthiness. They say, "I'm being realistic," when they are simply memorializing failure. They wrap lack in language that sounds noble, but heaven does not read nobility. It reads authority. It reads tone, and tone does not lie. If your speech consistently bends toward adjustment, hesitation, or apology, then the law will not deliver anything that requires boldness to hold. Not because you are unfit, but because your field is not structured to receive it. You do not need to say, "I am poor," for the law to respond accordingly. You only need to speak as if you are still asking for permission to live above necessity. You only need to speak as if overflow is a rare guest instead of a structural promise. You only need to pause before every purchase, wince before every opportunity, explain before every increase, and the law will confirm that tone as your true command. This is how you cancel provision, not by sin, but by softness. Not by rebellion, but by resignation. By constantly pulling back your own word before it can take root. By treating abundance like a guest you don't want to offend. But divine supply is not a guest. It is a birthright, and it cannot stay where it is being constantly apologized for. You may say, "I didn't realize I was doing that." And I say that is precisely why it worked. The subconscious obeys what is consistent, not what is conscious. The law is not mocked, it is simply exact. It will not round up your faith to the nearest breakthrough. It will reflect only what has been authorized without contradiction. That contradiction often lives in the small, quiet phrases, the ones you think don't matter. I'll never be that kind of person. That's above my pay grade. I'm not one of those people who just gets lucky. I don't need that much anyway. I'm fine with whatever. You may think you are being modest, but in spiritual law, modesty becomes instruction. And unless that instruction is revoked, the law must reduce your harvest to match the version of you that does not expect to carry more. Even silence can be agreement. Every time you remain quiet while lack is spoken over you, every time you nod along with worry, every time you shrink in the presence of provision, every time you pretend not to know your own power, you are, by omission, confirming a limitation that heaven did not put there. And what you confirm, you extend. So if you truly wish to rise, begin by removing the phrases that cradle your current ceiling. Stop normalizing interruption. Stop predicting loss. Stop softening good news before it's even landed. Stop protecting the version of you who was taught that money is dangerous, success is suspicious, and abundance must be hidden to be holy. You cannot be divinely provided for while still emotionally loyal to the atmosphere of insufficiency. The law will not split itself to honor your desire and your doubt at the same time. One must be dismissed, one must be dethroned, and only one can be king in your speech. You may not remember every decree, but your life does. Your system does. And your harvest is nothing more than a trail of receipts proving what has been consistently allowed, down to the tone, the sigh, the hesitation, and the sentence you've said for years without knowing it held power. That sentence must be retired, for until you cancel the contract, the law cannot write a new one. And so I ask you, not what do you want, but what do you still say without even thinking? That is the real ruler. That is the quiet judge. That is the reason you still receive less than what you pray for. Not because the answer is delayed, but because the old command is still in effect. You do not need to want more, you already do. Everyone does. The desire for more is not what activates the law. It is not rare, not holy, not sufficient. It is universal. Even the man who has given up still wants, he simply stopped admitting it aloud. Desire is not the signal, it is not the access point, it is not even the beginning. It is ambient, automatic, assumed. The real shift, spiritually, legally, energetically, happens not when you want more, but when you allow more to become your new default. That is the axis. That is the difference between temporary improvement and permanent permission. The law does not reward longing, it rewards structure. And structure is not built in excitement. It is built in what you no longer question. So I ask you, what do you no longer question? What are you silently sure of beneath your affirmations? What have you stopped fighting because you assumed it could not change? That is your real decree. That is what the law is building around. Not what you wrote last night in prayer, but what you now treat as inevitable. If you treat insufficiency as permanent, even subtly, even unconsciously, then the law must hold it in place, not to torment you, but to protect your command. Many believe the answer is more faith, but I say faith has already been given. It is not something you earn or stir up, it is something you aim. And if your faith is aimed at survival, then survival will flourish, at the expense of increase. If your faith is aimed at what you fear, then your fear will become a fortified city that even blessings cannot enter. The real work, then, is not more faith. It is the redirection of certainty. You must examine what your life is silently anchored to. For until you move the anchor, the ship cannot drift far. Every time you begin to grow, every time provision tries to reach you, you will unconsciously pull yourself back. Not because you don't want more, but because you still treat more as the exception. You say, I believe in overflow, but do you design for it? You say, I trust divine timing, but do you brace for delay? You say, money comes to me, but do you still flinch when it does? The truth is, you can want more and still reject it by default. You can desire expansion and still feel dishonest when it shows up. You can pursue success and still speak from a posture that was trained in disappointment. And the law does not override that contradiction. It resolves it by defaulting to whatever is most familiar. You are not blessed according to desire. You are blessed according to design. And your design is revealed not in what you say when inspired, but in how you carry yourself when unguarded. That is where the truth lives, in how you plan your month, in how you imagine conversations, in how you react to good news, in how quickly you prepare for things to go wrong. These are not quirks, they are your spiritual filing system. They are the blueprint of what the subconscious has accepted as safe, and the law, being exact, will build around that safety, not your aspiration. This is why change feels like loss at first. Because you are not simply gaining something new, you are losing the right to keep calling yourself the same. You are surrendering your old normal, and that feels like death to the subconscious. It panics, it screams, it warns you, this is unfamiliar, this is dangerous, this is not who we are. But that voice is not God. It is not prophecy. It is residue. It is the echo of a structure that no longer fits the future you have asked for, and it must be retrained, not silenced, not shamed, but gently, firmly overwritten with a new baseline, a new tone, a new frame that says, we are safe in the new, we are supported in the unfamiliar, we are held even in expansion. Until that becomes automatic, the law cannot give you anything that feels larger than your current emotional house. You do not need to want more. You need to stop resisting what already belongs to you. You need to stop doubting what has already been permitted in the heavenlies. For every time you say, I'm not used to this, this feels too good to be true, I hope I don't lose it, you are reinforcing an old legal ceiling, one that was built in fear, not in alignment. And I tell you this plainly, the law cannot promote you beyond what your atmosphere can legally host. It will not let you prosper at the expense of your inner integrity. If increase feels unsafe, it will reverse itself. Not because it was false, but because your system rejected it like a body rejecting a transplant. So do not ask the law to deliver what you haven't prepared to hold. Do not pray for what your tone still resists. Do not fast for what your imagination still treats as alien. The law is not moved by hunger, it is moved by permission. And permission is granted by tone. So you must change the tone. Change what is automatic, change what is assumed. Let increase become so familiar that lack begins to feel foreign. Let peace become so structural that chaos can no longer find a seat in your atmosphere. Let favor become so normalized that delays start to feel like errors, no longer confirmations. This is not arrogance, this is divine order. This is what it means to be aligned with the law. You do not need to scream, you do not need to beg, you do not need to prove your worth. You need only to change what you allow as normal. And when you do, the law will recognize your new structure and confirm it without delay. You say the law has not answered, but the law never delays. The law never hesitates. The law never withholds. It simply confirms what has already been spoken. And it has been speaking back to you, faithfully, exactly, and without deviation. Every result you've seen, every cycle you've repeated, every opportunity you feared then lost, every ceiling you returned to after a breakthrough, that was not silence. That was confirmation. That was the law upholding what your system still called normal. It may not be what you wanted, but it is what you ruled. For every decree holds until it is canceled, and most decrees are never canceled. They are buried, they are ignored, they are hidden beneath layers of positive thinking, spiritual performance, and hopeful language, but they remain intact, active, operational. And the law, being perfect, does not skip over an old command simply because you've outgrown it emotionally. It only responds to change when that change becomes the new constant. This is where most prayers fail, not because they are wrong, but because they are unstable. The tongue blesses and curses in the same breath. The heart declares one truth in the morning and lives another by night. The subconscious listens and must decide which voice is the real one. It cannot honor both. It does not average them out. It selects the most consistent tone and acts accordingly. So if you still live inside old results, it is not because the law has been unjust. It is because the law has been precise. It heard your ruling, it executed the design, it honored your tone, your posture, your atmosphere, even when those things no longer matched your new desire. And until the old ruling is revoked, the structure must remain. This is not punishment. This is spiritual due process. You are not being denied. You are being governed by words you may have forgotten, but which the law still remembers. I never get chosen. Nothing ever works out for me. I always mess it up. I don't want too much. I'm not ready yet. It's too late for me. That's not realistic. I'm fine with less. These phrases may have been spoken long ago, in fear, in trauma, in exhaustion. But if they were not formally canceled, if they were not overwritten with new, consistent, lawful declarations, they remain in effect. Like contracts left unsigned but still enforceable, and the law has no choice but to obey. Even now, you may still be praying, still declaring, still believing, and wondering why nothing changes. And I ask you gently, have you revoked the former word? Have you rescinded the inner contract that declared you undeserving? Have you stood before the law, not to plead, but to reverse the old ruling? Because until you do, every new request must pass through a filter that has already ruled against it. You are not being ignored. You are being matched. Every time the money fell through, every time the door closed, every time the support withdrew, every time things almost worked, then unraveled. It was not rejection. It was a system honoring the tone you had already authorized as law. So stop asking, where's my harvest, and start asking, what have I forgotten to cancel? You are not stuck. You are structured. And the structure is legal, not circumstantial, spiritual, not emotional, exact, not vague. You do not need to beg. You do not need to convince. You do not need to chase. You need only to stand as the sovereign over your own field and issue a new decree. Not once, not loudly, but legally, repeatedly, without contradiction, without apology, without backing down when discomfort rises. For that discomfort is only the old system recognizing that its jurisdiction is coming to an end. And when you hold your new tone longer than you've held your fear, the structure will begin to shake. Old patterns will collapse. What was once impossible will appear obvious, and you will look around at a new world, not because God changed his mind, but because you finally changed your court. The law did not fail, it confirmed. And now it will confirm again. Not what you hope, but what you prove. Prove it with your posture. Prove it with your tone. Prove it with your atmosphere. And when the law sees that your default has shifted, it will not hesitate. It will move immediately, irreversibly. Because the answer was never withheld. It was simply waiting for the new structure to make it legal. You are not waiting for the law. You are waiting for yourself to stop contradicting what has already been given. And the moment you do, it will be as if heaven was never silent at all.